Thank you, everybody. Is there anyone here for public comments this evening?
You are? Yes.
You could introduce yourselves so we know who you are and what's on your mind.
My name is Michael Phelan.
All right, good evening. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Like I said, my name is Michael Phelan. I've been a resident of Burlington. I taught 7th and 8th grade at the Francis Wyman School for 5 years, and I taught math and computers, technology at Burlington High School for 25 years. I also have coached the boys team for approximately, and after that I picked up the girls tennis team for 8 years. The reason I'm here tonight is over the last 14 years, the boys coach, Rob Newton, and myself, and several volunteers have run a tennis tournament at Rohannes Park in order to raise the funds to fund 2 $500 tennis scholarships for one boy and one girl at the high school. Over the last 14 years, we have given out $14,000 in scholarship, one $500 to a boy, one $500 to a girl. While leaving in excess, we still have approximately $12,000 in the bank at Reading Cooperative in Burlington under my name. And here comes the problem. I have a good friend of mine who's very savvy financially, and when I told him about this year, he said, "You really shouldn't have that money under your name." He said, "If something happens, you get in an accident, somebody's seriously hurt, and it's your fault, someone falls on your sidewalk, cracks their head," and he kind of made me quite nervous, to be honest with you. So I said, what should I do? He said, "Well, you got to get that out of your name." So what I did is I went to the recreation department. I worked as a young college student for the rec under Don Roberts, keeping time at the tennis court. But I went to Brendan, I guess, and I said, "Look, we have this $12,000, $13,000 in the bank, and I don't want to keep it under my name." I said, "Can we set up an account, a scholarship account, with the recreation, set up an account, a scholarship account, rest where I can come, and after every year, take out $1,000, give out the 2 scholarships." And he said, "Sure." Fast forward, went up there after the first year, after we did the tournament, and asked him for the $1,000. And he looked me straight in the eye and says, "No." He said, "That money is ours." And at that point, that's basically where it is. We got $12,000 of scholarship money, which will give out 24 scholarships that he refuses to give me. And I have no solution to it. So I guess I'm looking toward you people, or maybe I should go someplace else, I don't know. It bothers me. It has bothered me for just about a year. And knowing Phil very well, I won't tell him where we were, Phil, okay?
Thank you.
I ran up by him, and he said, "Why don't you come and talk to you people?" Honestly, it bothers me. It almost bothers me every single day that I gave the money back to them and said, "Can you hold this for us under a scholarship account?" And they said, "Sure." And when I went to get it, it was a blunt, "No, you're not getting it." And honestly, there was a few words said, a lot came from my mouth and a few came from his that weren't too pretty. But I'd like to get the money back, and I have no idea how to do it.
All right, I think a few questions. Since it's not on the agenda, I don't think we can really discuss it or take any action upon it, but I think we can have the subcommittee look into, the rec subcommittee.
I'm sorry, I don't
Look into
mean to- there is one more thing. When I gave him the money, I did say, we have a shed where we keep the tennis equipment. It's almost like in the woods, and when it rains, you literally have to walk through 6 inches of water to get to the shed. It's a cinder block shed, it's been there probably for 50 years. It's horrendous inside, to be very honest with you, but that's what's been there for the last probably 25 years. I told him, I said, listen, Brandon, I said, if you'd like, if you want to buy a shed, put it up probably in the parking lot where it should be, because it's way in the back and we have to walk around the whole courts to get to the gate opening. I said, I don't mind if you take some of the money that's in there. And literally, I was looking for him to buy one of these Home Depot sheds. We don't really need much. And to put it up, lock it in the parking lot, and we can just pull the balls out. To take the balls out of the shed now, you have to literally take it out almost where the playground is and run it all the way around to the front where the parking lot is. I said, that would be a great placement. And he said, okay, he said, yeah. We got no shed.
Okay. Couple of questions. Phil, do you have anything to add?
I know you don't have it on the agenda at citizens' time, but I would suggest we put it on the agenda at your convenience over the next couple of weeks. And I would just say that, a sum of that amount from what essentially is a private group should somehow be reconciled in accounting or whatever the recreation does when they get monies in that amount. I mean, that just didn't grow on trees.
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, I would, have you gone in front of the Recreation Commission, commissioners, and discussed the situation with them?
Not the commissioners, like I said, I went to Brendan.
Right.
Actually, I've gone to him twice. And the answer,
Well, my recommendation would be, the first thing would be to go to the Recreation Commission meeting, where all the commissioners that are there, they're all elected officials, and bring up the subject then and let them, they can override Brendan what to do with the money if they feel that it ought to be handled in a different way. The other thing that you might be able to do is you might want to contact, if you get the money, if they do give it back to you, is you might want to contact the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation.
Yeah.
They may set it aside for you.
You're absolutely right. After going through this, I would take that money and put it in the town
Okay.
scholarship.
Anything else, Tom?
No, that's it.
Diane, did you have a question?
I mean, I was going to say the exact thing. Recreation has a meeting every single month. Go to them. They are Brendan's boss, and tell them exactly what you told us. And I mean, they'd be able to resolve it pretty quickly, and then transfer it into the Scholarship Foundation.
No, but isn't Brendan the boss?
No,
He has a board, the Recreation Board, and they meet, and it's public meeting just like we have.
right.
It's
He
all,
works for them.
yeah.
The supervising authority is the board.
I mean,
Yeah.
look on the website. I know Kevin Sullivan's on the board. I don't know if Christine Brown's on the board.
She's the chair.
I mean,
Yeah, she's finishing, and
I know Kevin Sullivan very, very well, and I've talked to Kevin Sullivan.
but Mike, you need to do it in public, at a public meeting, and tell them straight out exactly what you told us. They're the board that's gonna actually resolve it for you, and, Brendan works for them.
Yep.
So, I would do that.
So I think we can follow up, the subcommittee here can follow up on it, but I think you should start with the
Recreation.
Recreation Commission and bring any documentation that you have, and if there's any communications that go with that. Because I think you want to avoid, you want to get as many facts on the table as you can, but, so.
Well, honestly, we really don't have that much documentation.
I assume there's a canceled
Would've been
check.
nice if I had
I know
documentation.
14 years ago, when we went to I did go to the 14 years ago before we doing the fundraising and everything. I did went to the board, and then that was why Kevin suggested we raise the money and then give it the money. And at that time, we talked to Mr. Roberts, and then he just say, Don Roberts. He was a director at that time. He told us we just put the money with the rec department, and so we don't have to create another account and everything. And that's how we started, and since then, over 14 years, we faithfully run tennis tournaments and put all the money in that account. And I think, as Mr. Phelan said, before, we did ask for a shed, and then that was only over 14 years, we haven't got a shed yet. And if they really want to use that money to improve their harness, then I think that they probably should have done that long time ago. And even at that time, when Mr. Robert was still a director, we said we are using the money, if they are not doing anything to change the shed, then we are using that for a scholarship. And for some reason, we cannot get that money for scholarship anymore. That's why we are kind of,
Okay, well, I think your next step is to go to the Recreation Commission
all right.
and
And then follow up here.
then follow up
Just
here.
want to bring it up of attention, so no, there's an issue there, and we cannot resolve for a while. For a long time, actually, Mr. Phelan has tried to resolve for years, and we still haven't got it done yet, so.
Okay. That's our, Diane?
Just one other thing, before you actually go to the board, document it in an email telling them exactly all the facts, and then go to the meeting, so that you have a paper trail of exactly what happened, so that they can be prepared. Because that's who you have the grievance with, is with them, so.
Yeah, can I ask a question, is that, because when we start doing this, I went to the meeting, do you think they have some documentations that they have, I brought this issue before we started, and then I know at that time, Jeff Fair was our liaison to help us to do these things. Do you think they will have some documents?
The town clerk should have minutes from all the meetings.
Yeah, I
Maybe
mean,
The
back
town
forever.
treasurer will have the deposit, I think, as well.
Yeah. Right.
go on the town's website, look up the board, and email the whole group of them, and then show up at the meeting. It's all public, and it's
Yeah,
recorded.
we'll have to do that. All right, thank you.
All right. Did you have anything else, John?
just.
Or just, sorry, Doug, yes.
I just, do you remember what year did you transfer the money? Did
We
you
actually.
give them 12,000 or what was the amount?
We started involved tournaments as 2004.
Right.
And then, there, actually, we setting up the fund, and we didn't really transfer any, do we? No, they were just in that account, and then every year, they kind of give me, like, how much that we have in balance, that's all. The
Okay.
documentation.
So there
that we
wasn't
have.
you didn't write a check that we could,
No,
that
no,
we would
usually
say,
that if we need
it
something.
just came from
we
the
go to-
tournaments?
Yeah, to rec
Okay.
department to ask for
Okay.
them, give us some money.
Just want to say one more thing, and then we'll get out of your hair. We, no. Oh, when I was talking to Brendan the last time, I found out from, I won't say who, but somebody who's involved with the town, that that money, I'm sorry, I'm afraid that money, he's told me they're about to repave the courts at Rahanis Park, which is a huge amount of money. And the first thought in my mind was that this money is going there. And it would just be a shame. The courts really are not in that bad of a shape, to be honest.
I can just say one of the subcommittee members for the Recreation Department, that's not on the plan, but there is, from our presentation a couple of weeks ago, there is a shed, the tear down of the old building and a new shed
Yeah.
for this spring. So something is happening over there, but not resurfacing. I think that happened, the town paid for the resurfacing back in 2007, I don't know, maybe, I think, if I remember.
Okay, thank you for raising the concern. I think, yes, sorry, Tom?
In the process of emailing the rep commissioners, one of the things you want to put in your email is requesting to be on the agenda for the next meeting, and ask them to send you a copy of that agenda. That way you'll know like we all have an agenda we go by. And so, your request will be put on the agenda, so it's all official. Okay?
Do you have the email address?
So we can find out.
Oh, we can
I
find
think they're online.
It is.
Also, from this discussion, if in your documentation, you can include the timeline with as many years and dates as you can, that will help establish what happened when, so.
I will say one more thing. To run these tournaments, to raise the money, we literally had Rob Newton, myself, Tintin, and probably 7 or 8 other people who never got paid a dime. And we had probably 35, 40 people every single year come. It was very, very popular. The boys' coach who works at a tennis club, what's the name of it?
Cedardale.
Cedardale is basically one of the top pros at Cedardale. And he would bring an awful lot of his juniors, and even the adults that played there, down to this tournament. And that's basically how we made an awful lot of money, to be honest with you. People loved it. We gave them shirts that said Rahanas Park tournament, the 14th one, the 15th one. We gave out trophies. We bought the tennis balls for them.
I agree, it's a great program. My kids participated as well, but I think that doesn't bear directly on the issue.
That's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, yes, Tom?
Just a quick comment. I was the past president of the Burlington Baseball Softball Association many years ago, and we had some issues with fields and things like that. What I did was I went to the Recreation Commissioners themselves to discuss the problem, to get it resolved. And that seems to be the best way, is go to the actual, I mean, they're elected officials. They oversee Brendan, they oversee at the time, they oversaw Don Roberts and anybody else involved, so, Doug Gillingham as well, when there was 2 separate departments. But that's the way to go.
Okay.
But I would ask you, if you do go to the recreation department,
Come back.
I would probably find out which members of Ways and Means are on the Rec Department Subcommittee, and I would contact one of them and have a discussion as to whether he or she thinks is what the best route is.
And it's Doug and Sonia.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much.
Yep, all right. On to the budget. I put an item in the budget about if there are any updates to the budget documents. Whitney mailed around a couple of updates and updated the things on the Ways and Means website, so everybody should have seen that. Shall we jump into the budget, starting with MIS Department 155?
Well, Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes?
For a second. I'd like to possibly request maybe we could have a moment of silence in memory of Joan Miles, who passed away. For those who don't know who Joan is was a school committee, on the school committee for many, many, many years. The high school library is named after her, and she is the founding member and the first president of the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation. She passed away she was a little over 90 in Florida about a week ago, and she was an outstanding member of this community, and a lot of people in this town should be indebted to her because, God bless her, because she was a wonderful community activist. If that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, MIS?
Okay, we voted, subcommittee voted, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Subcommittee voted 2-0 in favor of this, and I'd like to have the chairman do the presentation on this, because he's a software engineer. That would be more helpful, I think, for the committee.
Well, you were going to write up the minutes, but, so.
Oh, I have written them up, I just haven't submitted them.
Well, this is good. So we met the other day to talk with MIS department heads. The budget that was sent around was revised down from what looked like an alarming 8.8% number. But the biggest difference in that, in what appears to be a large increase, were some accounting changes that moved costs of software from other departments into the MIS budget. So without those changes, without those accounting changes, the budget only goes up 0.11%, if I've got that right. And the differences, the particular pieces of item that was added into the biggest one is software called Viewpoint, which is used for managing of building permits. It's a complete public, external, internal document management system. And it's not yet in operation, but any day now, and it should help a great deal with the paper flow and the speed things through there. Otherwise, I think the budget is fairly unremarkable. It's pretty close to level funded except for some steps. And maybe I should just let the department head add anything to that. Or-
Good evening. My name is Jose de Souza. Joe Bongiorno to my left. You guys all know Paul Severino to my right. Really haven't much to say because I guess you said it all just in few words. You noted that we have an increase of 5.69% for this year. And mostly is due to a new billing software that we are acquiring. And that would be for a payment of $25,000 something. And because of your recommendation of Mr. Gallagher's, we say that if we didn't have included this piece of software, our increase would have been only 0.11%.
Great. Paul, you're sitting there. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just to add, it's not really a new accounting procedure. It's just the new software maintenance costs that they've had to pick up this year. And this software benefits land use departments, mostly over in the annex. It's going to allow them to communicate better with each other and with the public, and provide a central location for all the permits and documents that come through those departments. So several years ago, when we really started to put more thought and resources into MIS, we sort of came up with a system where entity-wide software, they should be the budget holder of that, and the Viewpoint software transcends multiple departments, so this doesn't really fit in any other department. Munis doesn't fit it, many departments use it, so it's in the MIS budget. You will still see software very specific to a department within that budget. That would be the kind of software that just that department needs to use. So that's kind of how we've broken it down to this point. But it's not really a change in how we account for this. It's just we have this new product that town meeting appropriated the funds for several years ago. And now they're getting ready to implement it, and we have this annual maintenance cost for the software. And we stuck it in the MIS budget, so their percentage is the one that takes the hit. And they let us know when we sat down on that. And I would come sit here and back them up on it, because it's not really an increase that's attributable to MIS activities at this point.
Thank you. One other comment you probably noticed they broke out the costs of Munis in the tables under finance software so that they could itemize the individual Munis packages, and it'd be visible what the costs are. So it's not just this big number, but it actually lists all of the individual packages that we use from Munis. Steve?
I have a request with that. Could you next year just write Munis dash and then each of the modules, and then that way we know it's just Munis? Does that make sense?
Anyway, John?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood the Munis stuff in particular. It looks like about 90K of Munis costs there. So I guess the first question is that an annual maintenance charge, or it's not buying new modules, it's just maintenance?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
You'll see a warrant article at the upcoming meeting that continues the trend of implementing some of the ISAC recommendations. So MIS has a warrant article that you'll see in a few weeks, which does include the purchase of a couple of new modules.
Okay, and
This is the maintenance cost.
so has that 90K come out of some other budget then?
No, it's always been there. That's why I said it's not really a change. We've had,
Oh, because there's no prior requested on that is why I'm wondering that.
I think that's the very top line, number one. Am I looking at where you're looking at?
Oh, the 73 became these split up ones. Got it. Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Are there other questions? All right, seeing none.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? I think that was 10-0-1. All right, thank you. Should we move on to the building inspector's
Building
budget?
inspector.
I'm just doing them in order here. This is Department
that's good.
241.
Okay, obviously, there's a change in this department. Shows 1.6, but the other cover sheet shows 4.64, so you have to refresh my memory on that. And also, in the, we've got half a person in there on the permanent full-time, the $33,000, which is not expended yet, right? It's not going to be, not put on board until mid-year?
That's the plan.
Right. Also, their portion of the contracted services of the Viewpoint software is roughly $3,000-something, which goes over to IT. That's why you see that 13.91%. We voted 2-0, and I did want to, Andy put together a great package here. One of the things I did want to point out, if you haven't seen this before, over the last 15 years, they have essentially put up $3.1 billion in new construction and value. And that's a sizable amount of fees, building fees received with $31 million over that 15-year period. And obviously with that $3 billion with inflation and with our commercial tax rate represents a huge amount of tax revenues that we're getting as a result. So Andy, if you got anything to...
The only thing I'll add to that, folks, is that with the traffic that we have coming into the office, both by phone, email, and people walking in, this next year is going to be just as busy as it has been in the last 6 years for the town. There's a lot of stuff that has been approved through the planning board, and those developments and the people responsible for those are calling in now looking to start submitting for permits. We don't see right now another slowdown or a slowdown for the community for at least another 3 years with the activity that is ongoing, that which is proposed.
Just to point out for the committee, you may recall this actual budget presented to you is plus one employee. You may recall 2 years ago, we set up a warrant article to fund an additional inspector. We said that we were going to review that after a period of 2 years and determine whether or not we felt the time was right to permanently increase the budget with that staff person. You've heard some of the numbers here. I think we had to talk ways and means out of adding it to the budget 2 years ago. There was strong support for that at the time, but we did want to just sort of see if the economic activity continued at the pace it was continuing at, or if we were just sort of dealing with sort of a bulge in the development of this system. But we firmly believe that the position is warranted. So what we're doing, that warrant article will run out. We moved an inspector position into the budget that was previously funded. So same amount of people as they had been operating on the past 2 years. We just moved it from the warrant article to the budget. So it is technically a +1 to the head count for this budget.
All right, John?
Thank you. There's two things that are confusing me here. The first one is when I look at the summary for overtime, it says 30,000 for supervisory, but if I go to the breakout page on that, it has supervisory approved being 0. So I'm trying to understand which one's the right number there.
30,000.
All right, so the supervisory approved really is 30,000, not 0 then. All right, and then the other question is, on the cover sheet that was online, it has a budget increase of negative 1.79%, but on the one you just handed us, it says 4.64 positive.
That may be an administrative error on my end.
which one's the right number, I guess?
4.6,
4.64, because it had 4.64 crossed out with negative 1.79.
right.
Spreadsheet has minus 1.79.
Yeah, right, there's, all the data we have from online is negative 1.79, so I'm inclined to think that that's the right number, but this new one you just handed out is confusing me.
I have it at minus the 179, so I think it might be a question of updating.
So we should go with that. So just to make sure we're voting on the right number ultimately here, it's the 670,494 is the proper number?
That's the one I have.
Correct.
Okay, everyone likes that total in the end. Okay.
Steve?
I just have a quick question regarding the FTE count and the full-time number of 603,089. So that's with the 8 people, so there's a decrease in that line item even though we brought in that person under that budget?
Yes, the new person is budgeted for a half year, is what we typically do with new positions to sort of phase in the expense of it. It's gonna take us a while to hire the person, and there's still almost a half a year left in the warrant article, because from the time it was approved to the time we were able to hire an inspector. So we feel as though if the opportunity presented itself where we had an inspector on July 1st, we could manage to get through the year with maybe some minor adjustments.
Okay, that's great, thanks.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none?
Motion to approve 670,494 for the building department,
Second.
budget 241.
All 41?
Sorry.
All in favor?
A little eager there.
To be expended in FY 2020.
Opposed? Any opposed? Abstaining? 10-0-0. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. If I could just have 1 minute?
Sure.
There's a celebration planned for Mr. Clancy on March 31st, which is a Sunday, 3 to 7, selling tickets for $25 out of the Selectman's office. So there'll be a celebration of retirement party for John on that date. So I think it's been distributed. I think Amy's probably going to possibly distribute it to all town meeting members, but those are the details. That's a Sunday. So if anybody wishes to attend, I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Any place good?
Escadrille,
Cafe Escadrille.
Okay. That's pretty good.
Yes.
not shabby.
Great, thanks. Thank you. Pressing on, sealer weights and measures. I think this is a pretty cut and
Pretty
dry
flat,
budget,
yes.
right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
44?
$7,800 been flat for as many years as I can remember. Everybody knows what the sealer of weights and measures does? Okay. Subcommittee vote is 2-0.
And we don't actually have a sealer of weights and measures, right? This is the contract with the state,
That's correct, yes.
partially paid with this amount and partially paid from the fees that come from the inspections of the,
Yep.
okay. Questions, anyone?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed, abstaining, 10-0-0. Thank you. Next up, the Veterans Department 543. Welcome, Chris.
How you doing?
Good.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is up 3.24%. The only comment I would make on this is the Veterans Aid account is $110,000. It's a 75% reimbursement from the state, dollar for dollar, so we get 75% of that back. And it's essentially just Mr. Hannafin and a principal clerk. And there's a step in there, I believe, that's helping to boost it up to the 3.24%.
The latest number.
I think the percentage in the spreadsheet is 1.64, right? Is that what you said?
Oh, I'm looking at the full time, I'm sorry, yes. It's 164 on the total.
Do you have anything to add? Because-
I guess the only thing that I really need to talk about is the Veterans Aid. That's the biggest portion of this budget. It's mandated by the state that we have that money in the budget. But like Mr. Gallagher said, 75% of that is being reimbursed from the state due to it being a mass general law. That fluctuates from year to year depending on who's eligible for aid. It fluctuates from year to year in regards to people that are on aid. And the saddest part of my job is seeing the people that come off the aid most of the time due to death. So that's where the fluctuation is mostly occurring. The number is the same from last year, but we did see a slight uptick in regards to people that are eligible, most of those coming from the assisted living facilities within town. So it's individuals that may not necessarily have grown up or lived in town, but are now moving back into the assisted living facilities. The assisted living facilities, I would say, do a okay job in notifying people that are coming in that are veterans that they may be qualified for aid. State aid is very strict. It's hard to come by. And the classifications in order to be eligible for state aid is not something that someone could obviously live on. For a single veteran or a surviving spouse, that cap is at $2,000 in regards to our monthly income, which could be Social Security, pensions, or otherwise, and then their asset levels have to be below $5,000. So that would be stocks, bonds, dividends, mutual funds, anything in a checking or savings account. Their home is not included as an asset, but anything else is. So as you can imagine, it's very difficult to qualify for that. The federal programs are a little less stringent, and that's a majority of the dealings that I have. So we have a select number of people that qualify for state aid, but I would say 90% of my job is dealing with the federal VA in regards to service-connected disabilities, non-service-connected pensions, and things of those sort that aren't coming from this budget. That is solely funded by the federal government. So that's where this budget is at.
The only thing I'll add is that the funds from the state don't come directly to Chris, which is why we appropriate the full amount. It comes in as part of our local aid from the state, and it's just used to offset the entire budget. We can't segregate it or anything like that. By statute, it's just a local state aid from the state, and it gets categorized under that large category of revenue source to fund the budget, so.
All right, questions, anyone? Don?
Chris, I'm just curious, do you get some list of veterans, like from the town census or something like that, so you can proactively go ask people, what help they might need, or?
Yes and no. Believe it or not, there are people that when they fill out the census don't check the box. There are people that do check the box that aren't veterans. And the list that I got 3 years ago had like 7,000 people on it. I've dwindled that down to 1,300.
Okay.
So the classifications in regards to someone actually being qualified as a veteran are, somewhat of a hazy line to some people. But yes, we have a relatively good understanding in regards to who may be a veteran. My biggest issue is the assisted living facilities or maybe even apartment complexes where people aren't necessarily filling out the census that they live in town. That's where the disconnect is. So I'm in the assisted living facilities maybe once a month. And I find a new gem every day. I just found out about a 99-year-old World War II veteran that served with Patton's Army. He's from the North Shore, moved into Burlington in August. Silver Star recipient, Bronze Star recipient, just an incredible man. Kind of makes my job great, but to find those people are somewhat difficult.
Must have been a lot of former Ways and Means Committee members who thought they were veterans, after serving here.
Great. Diane?
I think it would be worthwhile. What qualifies you to be a veteran? Why don't you say it right out?
So there's two classifications. If you served prior to 1980, it's 180 days of active service. Where the confusion is this the 180 days of active service other than your initial training, so let's say boot camp. And it doesn't include individuals that may be in the reserves or the National Guard where their active duty time is allocated as 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. So that activation in regards to 180 days has to be under Title 10, which is an activation either by the governor of Massachusetts to a unit that is now a part of the Department of Defense that falls under the, President of the United States, or a reserve unit that still falls under the DOD, but gets activated under Title 10. So that's where the biggest misconception is. I would say between 1945 and 1960, somewhere along the lines of maybe 80% of adult males had served in some fashion or another in either the National Guard or the reserves, and they receive a DD-214 that says exactly 6 months, 180 days. But that time does not count towards their active service. Now, after 1980, you have to serve 24 months. And it would be under the same classifications in regards to either you went active duty or you were a reservist and went Title 10. The one caveat that changes all of that is if you serve 1 day in a combat zone, you are a veteran. So those are the classifications. Now, the state has different classifications than the federal government does. And those get really confusing at times. So we mostly deal with federal guidelines.
Doug?
I just want to add, I don't know if everybody here knows, and I'm sure not everybody in town realizes the amount of time that Chris is willing to spend with young men who are or women considering joining the military. And I don't know if that's part of your official job description, because they're not veterans, but they're future veterans, the ones that choose. And to have someone to point those people to that's not a recruiter, whose job it is to sell them on joining is, I think for the town, it's phenomenal. I don't know how many people you actually talk to that actually come to you, but the fact that that's there, I mean, I have told many people, you gotta go talk to Chris, because I think, you've got the experience, but you can kind of tell them both sides of the story, is what I understand anyway. So it's appreciated.
Well, I appreciate that, but the one thing that I would say is, and I'm not trying to knock recruiters at all, but I had a bad experience when I was in high school dealing with one, and told me a flat-out lie. Not all recruiters are like that, but they do have a job. And so one of the things I go and talk into the high school every year in regards to sophomores, juniors, and seniors who may be considering going into the military. And I would say this, other than maybe getting married or buying a home, I don't care how old you are, it is the largest decision that you will ever make in your life. Because unlike going to college, where after a few weeks, if you decide, I don't like it, you can leave, you sign a 4-year contract of active duty and a 4-year contract of inactive reserves, you are owned by the United States government. So one of the things that I try to tell young kids is, if you want to do this, it is a noble profession, one of the most noble professions that you could ever do, and anybody that serves their country is a phenomenal human being as far as I'm concerned, because the dedication that it takes is unmatched by anything else other than maybe being a parent. So with that being said, I hope that recruiters are truthful to young, 17, 18, 19-year-old individuals. But part of the issue is they have a job to do, and there are numbers. There are a lot of jobs out there that are very easy to fill. I deal with a lot of kids, especially with me being a Marine, of people saying, oh, you're a Marine, I'd like to go Marine infantry. And I kind of laugh at that, and it's like, you would think, as someone that may think, Marine infantry, that's what they do. Less than 10% of the United States Marine Corps is combat-oriented. So 90% of the other jobs within the Marine Corps need to be filled. So in my OCS class of 300 candidates, I would say more than 75% of them within the first time them stepping foot said, and then they asked, what do you want to do? I want to be an infantry officer. Well, you do your first field exercise, and that kind of drops down. People are like, I don't want to do this.
It's loud.
But the issue with it is getting people initially. Everybody wants to go Marine infantry. And I try to tell people, like, you have to have the most understanding of what goes on before you can make that decision. And then the other thing that I like to do when I talk to these students is, let me talk to your parents. And because I dealt with a situation where my father said, you're not going in until you go to college. And it was probably a very good decision that he decided to do that. But there are some kids out there that are like, I don't want to go to college. I want to join the Navy. And it is a noble profession, but just know what you're getting yourself into. And then I'll also say this is, you know, in today's day and age when we're talking about free education and things like that, majority of people that are coming out of the military today at 22, 23 years old are getting that free education. And I'm not knocking the education system, but what I will say is they usually graduate within 3 years after that because they have a maturity of you know, life and life experience. And so when they get into the job field at 27 years old, they haven't lost a step in regards to someone that may have gone 18 to 22. In fact, they have more life experience than 90% of the people that live in this country. So I try to explain those things to parents, give them all the information, but at the end of the day, if a parent says, my kid's not joining the military, I mean, I hate to look my wife in the face if one of my kids says, hey, I'm gonna join the Marine Corps, I'm leaving. You convince your mother of that, because she went 8 years of that. I don't think that's gonna happen. You give her the information, and then by all means, but.
Okay, great. All
Move to
right.
approve? Oh, I'm sorry,
Steve
Steve.
had a question.
Just a quick question and a comment. Out of the 110,000, how much of the aid is actually distributed?
It fluctuates, and it fluctuates month to month as well. And the reason why I say that is because a large portion of that is fuel assistance. More fuel assistance goes out, obviously,
In the
during the
winter.
winter months than they do in the summer months. So I couldn't tell you a hard line number in regards to, I could tell you $8,800 went out this month. A little bit more than 8,800.
But in general, is all the 110,000 over the
No.
fiscal? No? Okay. And second, I really do appreciate all the efforts you do, especially organizing the Veterans Day and Memorial Day celebrations and the organizing the memorials and putting up the new memorial that's at the high school. The Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts and the Girl Scouts always come and support the veterans, and I'm always impressed with the way that you celebrate their lives and what they've done for the country. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Here, here.
Great. Tom?
Yeah, this is just a comment. She speaks very highly of you, but make sure you visit your grandmother a little bit more often.
Oh, called out, called out.
Tom, that's his ways and means. This is the budget. That's out of order.
She says it every
Next door
time I see
neighbor.
her.
Maybe want to do a shout out right now.
Move to approve.
Got a motion? Motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Any opposed? Abstentions? 10-0-0. Thank you very much. And we've got your, stay there, because we've got
Disability access, Mr.
590
Chairman.
disability access.
Okay, you would think this would be an easy one, since the budget is $932, down 60%. That is reflective of Chris cutting the number of meetings and the clerk down in half. But he also brought to our attention, first of all, disability access, you know, is the money comes to a fund, which is now $99,000, I think, Chris, after the last appropriation.
I have the numbers in regards to handicap parking, or handicap parking fine fund is at $89,937.
Okay, here's the problem he brought to our attention.
Phil, finish the budget.
Okay,
Unless
the budget,
you're going to get off the budget. Finish the
okay,
budget
all right.
first.
Well, I would move $932.
Second.
Okay, any question?
No, I'm about to vote.
All those in favor? All right, opposed, abstaining. So, Phil, you have something else about it?
As an addendum, Chris tells us that we have over $200,000 worth of uncollected tickets. Now, normally you would think we would get that money through the regular process, where if you go to re-register your car or gain a new license, et cetera, that the registry would inform you or will not issue a new license or a new registration till you've paid those tickets. Well, with $200,000 in outstanding tickets, apparently they're not doing a really good job. So my suggestion is that we put this into Representative Gordon and Senator Friedman's court and see if we can hustle this up. I mean, that's a huge amount of money. And we're not collecting it. Am I incorrect?
Just with the numbers and the initial numbers that I gave you, we did date back to 99, but apparently there's a statute of limitations, so we're only able to go back a certain number. So right now, outstanding is $84,000.
All right, well, that's good news and bad
The
news. That means we-
$200,000 is still outstanding.
Yeah, but we didn't collect
apparently
120,000 of it.
Yeah, correct.
Thanks, registry. In any event, Mr. Chairman, if you could, I would ask that you would send a note to Representative Gordon on behalf of the committee and Mr. Hannafin to get the ball rolling on collecting this money?
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
But I was wondering if Mr. Hannafin could write the note, so that we get the
And put it under
details.
Mr. Sagarino's signature as well.
Just so you know, to say the registry never misses any of my tickets. I don't know what's going on here.
Just so that, I mean, I've suggested if you could write such a description of things so that we get the details right and it's got the right attitude. I have a feeling I wouldn't get all the details, and it's good to have it come from the
Well, I
right.
can get
right
details.
office.
I can give you the plate number, the registration, the name.
Let's just divide it up.
No. All right, thank you. I think we're all set with the ability, oh, John.
Just a question on that. Definitely go for it. I'm just curious, are these tickets somehow in a different category? And, you know, I'm just curious, have we checked with the police department to make sure that they've, you know, been registered in the right way, that information got to the registry and so on?
The ticket wouldn't come to us, and we wouldn't have the ability to look at it as if it wasn't. So basically, the way that it works is the police officer writes the ticket, puts it on the dashboard, and takes the receipt. That then goes to the town. The town registers that with a third-party entity, and then the third-party entity puts it into the registration. We wouldn't know that it was at the registration if the third-party entity didn't give it to them.
Okay, so
And
the
that's how we're able to track the information.
Registry's definitely got this information then.
Right.
Okay, great.
Okay, Diane?
How much are these tickets, and are they from the Burlington Police? Like, what is it, does it look like a normal ticket?
The ticket is a $200 parking fine but there's two things associated with it. Let's say I pull up my car into a handicap parking spot, I don't have a placard, and I get a $200 ticket. Well, I could also, let's say Paul had a handicap parking or a placard, I stole it out of his car and I put it on mine. That's a $500 citation on top of the $200 ticket because it's a misuse. Now, that doesn't come to the handicap parking fine fund because it is a moving violation as opposed to the $200 just being a parking ticket. So that's enforceable. I mean, they're all enforceable by the court, but the $500 fine is obviously a lot more egregious, and there's additional fines that go along with that.
And it whacks your insurance too, to boot.
With Chris's help in the police department, they're very aggressive on these. We're able to give them on private property. Think of all the shopping malls at Christmas time, and it's unbelievable how many people continue to violate this. It's mind-blowing, so. But they've taken a very proactive approach, and I think we've used some of the funds to fund special patrols on them, and it's actually, we made the news a couple years ago, I think, for being so proactive on it. So we actually really take this very seriously, so.
All right, Steve?
Is towing ever an option, or when would it be an option? Like if somebody parks in the handicapped, do we have the ability to do that?
Towing is an option when there is a $500 use citation associated with any other situation, but it's not likely that an individual would get towed plus the $200 ticket.
Just to follow, do you actually mail something to these people to tell me what the procedure is, so they
And
get
so
it,
there's an appeal process that also goes through our office. So a letter goes out to them as well, outlining all of the information that they need to provide. Our office basically looks at it as if you do have a handicap placard and you just forgot to put it up, as long as you give us the information, we'll grant the appeal. I would say 50% of the tickets that are being written right now are appealed and granted just due to the fact that most of the time it's elderly people that either forgot to put it up or it may have fallen down. If they can show us association of a placard associated with the registration of a car and the name, we grant the appeal and there's no charge to them. Some of these outstanding fines are associated with fines as well. So, I mean, I have tickets back to 2013 with a $300, it's a $200 ticket, but a $300 fine associated with it because it hasn't been paid.
are you finding that a lot of them are Burlington residents, or they're out of, okay, because I was
No,
gonna
actually,
say-
we find a lot from out of state as well.
Okay,
New Hampshire and Rhode Island particularly that go to the mall. And we also find people that think that, oh, my boss said I could park there because I sprained my ankle. Well, that's not necessarily a situation as well. So, I mean, what happens in the appeals process is we contact the police department because there's a badge number associated with a ticket. We then talk to the police officer, and they have 21 days to file. And the reason why we give that 21 days is so the police officer at least has knowledge of, hey, do you remember this particular situation? And then we can backtrack in regards to the stories. But most of the appeals are granted just based off of information is provided, and I don't think that a cost should be associated with an individual that really is disabled. They just forgot to put a placard up.
thank you for doing that.
Okay, Mike?
Just a quick question while we're on this. It sounds like it's not okay if you are transporting someone who's handicapped to take their placard in your car. It has to go with the car that the placard was registered.
That could be a misused term as well, depending on what the police officer wants to do. So if, let's say, I'm a disabled person with a placard, and I'm driving Paul, and we want to go to the mall, and I park into the handicap parking spot, Paul gets out, but I don't, that's a misuse. And what we're seeing a lot of too is people that are saying, hey, I'm taking my mother, they forgot to take the placard down, or whatever it was. The individual that the placard is associated with isn't either in the car or some other circumstances. And most of the time, you're only gonna get a $200 ticket for that because it's not egregious, but it still is a misuse. And I just wanted to give you one figure in regards to something that we've been looking at. The Disability Access Commission has donated $332,133.82 since 2003 in regards to the parking fine numbers. So a majority of that money is now coming back to the town in regards to access issues. We just worked with the Recreation Department to update Reagan Park to make it accessible. We're working on other parks to make them more accessible. I think we have a very large project coming up in regards to Simons Park and trying to make Simons Park 100% accessible, but that's going to be a large one, so that's where the money's going.
It's gonna be a bear.
Great. Good to see that. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Just a couple more items of business. Next, just sort of next week, March, what are we, 20th, we've got public safety, fire, police, emergency management, and a couple that had to get rescheduled, town meeting reports and the assessors. I'll send out a reminder email and agenda. And then just for the week after, we'll be looking at the accommodated accounts that go with different departments. I'll resend that little table of accommodated accounts in the subcommittees, so people are aware of what we'll need to vote on, because those are their line item votes on the accommodated accounts. And then the last item I've got besides that leaving thing is, we've got minutes from February 27th. Most of the mistakes are probably mine, because I did an editing pass over it. So are there any comments on the minutes of February 27th?
sorry.
Can I have a
Motion to
motion?
approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor? 7 in favor, opposed, abstentions, 1, 2, 3, okay. Bill?
On the accommodated accounts, are you going to send out one of these which tells, the subcommittee's going to vote individually on the accommodated accounts within their departments? We're going to take them all up as a committee.
It's good if the subcommittee has a vote, but if they don't and it's familiar, then we don't necessarily need a subcommittee vote. If there's any, I mean, some of the things, some accommodated accounts are more interesting than others.
Right.
You know, the particular one I'm thinking of is the Cisco,
Routers.
year 6 of the Cisco license, which is
Right.
year 6 of something we've got to pay, so.
Well, could you tell me which accommodated accounts I have?
That one.
Yeah. Well, I think I have one or two others, but in any event, perhaps you could send out the significant ones with the subcommittee assignment on them?
Yes, I will,
Thank you.
I will send that out and remind people of what's on the agenda. That's in 2 weeks, so.
Yeah.
That's all I got on the agenda. Anything else?
Can I just say one thing? Just to let everyone know, the fiscal year 2018 financial statements are on the county website, so you can look at them along with the management letter and the other audit that they do of the federal grants.
Oh, excellent.
We did get a, what do you call it?
A letter? They're getting a letter?
No, we have a clean opinion, but they did say that we had a material weakness in our internal controls because of the school thing, so.
Oh, okay.
But you all
Right.
know. And
And that's on the town site?
it's on the town side, if you go under the accounting department, there's a, that tabs the financial statements for several years, and national letters for several years. But 18 just came out probably 2 weeks ago.
Okay, great.
Do you want to do the honors, Tom?
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor? All right, thanks, everybody. See you next week.